speaking to you from beautiful Philadelphia. We think of being creative as when we're sitting doing art, but the things we can do to become more creative, to come up with more original material, we can do well before we actually sit down to do art. If you want to become a better artist, if you want to continue to grow and become a better writer, one of the ways of doing this is to learn to start working, bringing more original material on board and start working with it. So just imagine that the next time you go to write or make art, that you have multiplied the amount of great ideas that you can hardly wait to start working with creatively. That, like, let's say that normally you have one or two good ideas. What if when you sit down you have 10 great ideas and you're excited to start working on them? Where do those great ideas come from? Sometimes it's helpful to look at it in terms of information, where basically if we start bringing a lot more information on board, we greatly improved our ability to start making new associations and working creatively with what we've got. So the tool I want to introduce to you is a world exploration tool. Now there are many, many ways of becoming a world explorer. I want to talk about two. One is where you go on a trip, you travel to some place you've never been before and go have that new experience. And one that is very different from that is where you don't travel. You can be totally in your hometown, but you can have just as original an experience, original to yourself, just by changing, recognizing how humans normally act and stepping out of that to take on the role of an explorer. So for the longest time, I framed it in my mind as living in the greater world. So I didn't travel very much for years and years and years. I worked my job, I lived where I lived, I worked on my art, and my friends, people I would run into that I knew, that didn't change very much. But the way I looked at it was in terms of living in the greater world. And that concept has to do with the idea that it is human nature for us to kind of build up a smaller world that we live in. And it's human nature for us to associate with people that are like-minded, that are like us, that share our same views, that do similar things. And this is human nature, and it's very deeply ingrained into our minds and our brains because we're social animals. So we live, we operate in ways that are part of forming a social fabric. And so we are most comfortable when we are part of a smaller society, of number of people that we know, that is eventually part of the great society, the global society that is the human vermin all over the planet. Now, as an artist, the problem with this is that it closes you in. You already, working with your art, you're already getting to know your inner life. An artistic life is a life where you're aware of your inner reality. And if that is also reflected in the people and society you're around all the time, it's all pretty much the same thing, and this sort of bubble kind of forms in our experience. And this is normally a perfectly healthy thing, but as an artist, as artists, we are interested in breaking out of that bubble by living in the greater world, is on a daily basis making an attempt to get to know people that are not like us, to get to know places we normally do not go, to try to see things in ways that we would normally not see them. Because right outside of these comfortable, mundane bubbles that humans form is a world of mystery, is a world of new experiences where amazing things are happening just down the block from where we live. Great new stories are being lived out. And the more we understand human nature, the more that we can get outside of that bubble and actually find out about some of those stories, and actually find out about the great mystery that we, for some reason as humans, we protect ourselves from. So one thing that is human behavior is that we subconsciously become less interested in people that are not like us. And so it is our experience that those people are less interesting, when the reality is that it's just that they're living out different life realities than us. And if we recognize our subconscious responses to people that are not like us and can move past that, we can make great discoveries. Now, when we're living in the greater world, it's helpful to keep in mind that very similar and yet so different other mode of exploration, where you actually go to like some country you've never been to before. And because in a lot of ways, those two activities are very similar. In one, we're physically moving to an unknown place, and in the other, we're moving outside of that bubble. So another thing that subconsciously can happen is that we just aren't as comfortable when we're out of our bubble of familiar social space. And if you just recognize that and appreciate that, that's part of the adventure. And if you become more attuned into how it is subconsciously happening, then you can change. You can change your outlook and eventually become a true explorer. Now, people who travel, they talk about culture shock, and this is where things are suddenly bewildering and unfamiliar, and we're confident in our hometown, but we're fumbling, we make mistakes, we don't know how to use the money, we struggle with the language barrier, we don't understand the customs, we don't know if someone is insulting us or trying to befriend us. There's all kinds of culture shock that can happen. And actually, this could happen a lot just in your hometown too, if you start moving outside of that bubble. There is a great percentage of artistic people who do this sort of thing naturally, because a lot of creative people are sort of outsiders from day one of their birth. They think differently. And so they're accustomed to kind of being a little bit in culture shock more than other people, and they feel more comfortable moving out into the greater world because they always felt a little bit different inside from those around them, no matter if they were with people who were very much like them or not like them at all. Now, how you choose to discover that greater world outside of the bubble is up to you. It could be anywhere from very deliberate attempts to just a matter of changing your approach to people in general. If you're just trying to break out of that bubble on a regular day-to-day basis, then explore people. Anyone you talk to, ask everyone you talk to, ask one mildly probing question. You know, if you meet someone who builds fences for a living, ask one question. Well, what do you do if there's a tree in the yard where you're going to build the fence? You know, just try to learn a little bit more and make that part of your life habits. Or you could be much more deliberate. For a while, I would videotape, interview people I would meet in downtown Seattle. So this was a deliberate attempt to meet people that were very much not like me at all, and interview them and get to know them better. And I'll go ahead and leave a couple of links below of some of those interviews so you can get an idea. The important thing, like in anything, you can be creative. You can find your own creative ways to break out of that bubble. Remember, mundanity, life being boring, those are results of our human nature, the way humans are built, to the way we keep ourselves safe, and we can still survive and live well and all of that, but right outside of that bubble of normality and mundanity, the things are not what they seem. Someone who lives down the street who you think is probably living the most boring life, in reality, if you investigate a little bit, they probably have a handful of stories that if put into film would blow people away. Life is narrative. People are narrative walking around, everyone. We all live with this uncertainty of life and death circumstances that we've all found ourselves in and live out and do our best to hang on and make things good for ourselves. I could elaborate on this topic for a long time, but for now I'm gonna leave it with this, because I'm sure that it's the kind of topic that gives you all kinds of ideas that are your own. I hope this topic was helpful and inspiring. If you want to get me back, please hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, tell a friend. And if you have a spare moment, check out my bizarre fiction project. It's going to be one mammoth story I'm putting up as free episodes at solomation.com. The name of the story is Terrible Immunity. My protagonist Lily goes on this adventure, alternate reality, very bizarre. I hope your writing goes great and that you make some great discoveries outside your doorstep, and have a good day.